It's hard to imagine a more horrific job than that of a soldier in the trenches of the First World War. Beyond the everyday horror of one of the bloodiest wars, it seems nearly impossible to add yet another level of brutality to it. However, humanity managed even this, and thus, following the deadlock of trench warfare, tunnel warfare was born. These miners experienced even greater horrors when the most brutal techniques for destroying enemies on the surface were transferred underground. In the dark, unsafe tunnels beneath no man's land, a deadly game of cat and mouse began. In this video, you will learn how the most terrifying battles were fought in literally impossible conditions underground, as well as the most horrifying ways people died, and stories so unbelievable that they are hard to accept, yet tragically true. Let's begin. When the battlefields of the Western Front transformed into an impenetrable gridlock of trenches and advancing forward became impossible, both the Allied and Central powers desperately sought solutions to this dire situation. The idea of digging tunnels under enemy lines was born out of sheer desperation and strategic necessity. The goal was simple: to plant explosives under enemy trenches to obliterate fortifications and troops, thereby creating chaos and breaches in defenses that surface troops could exploit. After the first successful attack by the German army on December 21, 1914, where they dug shallow tunnels under no man's land, placed and then detonated 10 to 110-pound mines beneath the trenches, annihilating an entire company of 800 soldiers. The effectiveness of this tactic was realized. The British soon began developing their own tunneling efforts. Shortly thereafter, the British Army had about 25,000 trained tunnelers, mostly volunteers from coal mining communities who were promised a pay of 6 shillings per day, double what they earned in the mines, and 6 times more than soldiers in the trenches. However, this job was far more dangerous than that of a standard mine, a tragic reality many of these miners would understand too late. The concept quickly spread, and soon both sides were digging extensive networks of tunnels and counter-tunnels. The underground turned into a battlefield, filled with horrifying dangers and truly terrifying claustrophobic conditions. Imagine this. Between two enemy lines lies no man's land. The main goal was to stealthily dig a narrow tunnel to the enemy's key positions in complete silence, place a large amount of explosives, sometimes in tons, and, once everything was ready, detonate it to obliterate the enemy's position, along with the soldiers in the trenches. This chaos was then exploited with a simultaneous coordinated infantry and artillery attack. This exact tactic led to the largest explosion of World War I during the Battle of Messines. After 18 months of preparation, 19 mines containing around 1 million pounds, approximately 450,000 kilograms, of explosives were detonated. This instantly annihilated about 10,000 German soldiers, collapsing and merging trenches and burying soldiers alive. The landscape remains altered to this day, with craters from the explosion still visible and visitable. However, both sides soon realized the dangers present in the unstable underground of no man's land. Miners could encounter an enemy tunnel, leading to horrific battles in tight, dark spaces deep underground. As mining activities intensified, both sides frequently detected and broke into each other's tunneling systems. Encounters often resulted in the use of a camouflet, a pre-prepared charge designed not to break the surface or form craters, but to destroy a strictly limited area of underground territory and its occupants. This charge was always ready in the British and Allied forces sectors. Vicious hand-to-hand fighting ensued in the dark, with tunnelers using picks, shovels, and pieces of wood as weapons. Although tunnelers were trained to use rifles and bayonets like standard soldiers, the cramped conditions made this impossible, so battles were primarily fought with mining tools. The psychological and physical toll on the soldiers was immense, with many not surviving these encounters, and activating the charge to collapse the enemy's tunnel could also collapse theirs and bury soldiers alive. As tactics and counter-tactics deployed against each other became less effective, the depth at which the tunnels needed to be dug increased. Deeper tunnels took longer to dig, increasing the chances of information leaks and tunnel collapses, creating bigger risks for entombment, drowning, or gassing of tunnelers in cramped claustrophobic conditions beneath no man's land. The Germans also resorted to pouring poisonous gas into tunnels when British miners were discovered. Meanwhile, British tunnelers employed stethoscopes pressed against the tunnel walls to listen for German activity. Silence often indicated the Germans were laying a mine, so ongoing noise from the enemy side was somewhat reassuring. In a discovery from 2019, a tunnel complex was unearthed on the battlefront in France. Known as the Winterberg tunnels, they were struck by precise French artillery fire on May 4, 1917, sealing the entrance and exit and trapping 270 German soldiers inside. Collapses were frequent and horrific. If miners hit water or unstable soil, the situation quickly became terrifying, as they could be quickly drowned or buried alive. As tunnels became a vital component of warfare, their vulnerability was a constant concern, making the entrances a closely guarded secret. With electricity scarce at the front, tunnelers often relied on candlelight for visibility. The tunnels were cold, cramped, and sometimes up to a foot deep in freezing water. Tunnel entrances were typically at the bottom of deep shafts, designed on a slight uphill gradient to help keep the passageways as dry as possible. This alignment for drainage also increased the risk of gas accumulation at the digging face. It was a constant threat, as gases from frontline firing and explosions could seep down and poison the miners. The use of canaries, which would show signs of distress or die from gas exposure before humans, was a grim but necessary method to gauge air safety. This early warning system allowed miners to immediately evacuate upon changing in canaries' behavior, before gases reached lethal levels for humans. If the enemy captured tunnel entrances or the territory around them, the tunnelers would be isolated, with rescue or escape becoming nearly impossible. Clay kicking was a specialized method used by British tunnelers to silently dig tunnels through clay-rich soils. A tunneler, known as the kicker, would lie on his back with his feet against a wooden frame and use a spade-like tool to kick out chunks of clay. This clay was then passed back to other team members, known as baggers and trammers, who removed it from the tunnel. This technique allowed for quiet and efficient excavation, minimizing the risk of detection by enemy forces. British teams could advance up to 8 meters per day using clay kicking. In contrast, German tunnelers used noisier pickaxes and mattocks, advancing only about 2 meters per day, making their efforts slower and more detectable. To support the tunnels, British engineers used timber frames made from cut wood. These supports were carefully placed throughout the tunnels but without the use of nails or screws, which could create noise and risk detection by enemy listening devices. Instead, the wood was designed to fit snugly together, and when exposed to the damp conditions underground, it would swell. This swelling helped to lock the timber pieces firmly in place, reinforcing the tunnel structure and reducing the risk of collapses. In fear of approaching tunnelers and them laying a massive mine under their feet, soldiers devised simple yet effective methods to detect enemy miners. They submerged oil drums filled with water into trenches, looking at the water's surface to detect vibrations from enemy digging. They would put sticks into the ground and bite on the other end, feeling vibrations through their teeth. As technology advanced, these primitive techniques were replaced with stethoscopes and later geophones, which could detect underground sounds up to 50 meters away. This allowed tunnelers to hear and locate enemy activity before it reached critical proximity, and even start digging towards them to intercept or to get beneath them and place a mine to collapse their tunnel. Human creativity is amazing, even when it's used to outsmart and destroy each other. In June 1916, at the peak of the underground war on the Western Front, the scale of tunnel warfare was staggering. British tunnelers detonated 100 mines, or camouflets, while their German counterparts set off 126. This resulted in a total of 227 mine explosions in just 1 month, averaging 1 detonation every 3 hours. Despite their crucial role, tunneling companies often made regular infantry nervous. Their presence added extra dangers to the already risky trench life. There was a constant threat from above as enemy artillery targeted the trenches relentlessly. Equally dangerous was the threat from below, caused by both friendly and enemy tunneling activities. Knowing that a tunneling unit was operating nearby meant the whole area could become a target for enemy artillery. As the war progressed, the mines used by both sides grew larger and were often placed dangerously close to one's own trenches. If these mines were not detonated precisely, or if they malfunctioned, they could scatter lethal debris over friendly troops and trenches, leading to significant additional casualties. As we reflect on the horrors of tunnel warfare during the First World War, we are reminded of the true horrors of conflict. Beneath the once battle-scarred landscapes of Europe, hundreds of tunnelers still lie entombed, their stories buried in the dark, forgotten tunnels where they last fought. These hidden graves across the Western Front reveal the devastating impacts of war and the tragic cost of human life.